Welcome back, grade 10s. Now let's look at our first concept, which is the meaning of the primary sector. The primary sector deals with the extraction or collecting or cultivating of raw materials and natural resources. So this sector basically deals with pulling of raw materials from Mother Nature in order for us to be able to take that particular materials and move them to the other sector, which is going to deal with those natural resources. So it has to do with cultivating, it has to do with extraction, pulling out of those raw materials from the nature. As you can see on the picture, we have a tractor, and this is a farm actually, so they are farming. We have coal. Coal is extracted from the raw, from the natural resource. It's a natural resource which is pulled from the nature. So hence we are saying the primary sector deals with the extraction, collecting or cultivating of raw materials. These natural resources include things such as livestock, your fish, your timber, your coal, and your gold. So obviously our livestock is a natural resource. Our fish, they're a natural resource. Our timber, it's a natural resource. A coal is a natural resource, as well as gold is a natural resource. So primary sector deals with all the natural resources. Here are examples of industries that you are going to find in the primary sector that deals with raw materials. We have agriculture, we have fishing, we have forestry, we have mining. Before we continue, so these industries are found in the primary sector because they deal with natural resources. So hence you find these industries in the primary sector. Now let's move on to the secondary sector. The secondary sector transforms the raw materials from the primary sector into finished or unfinished products. So here's the sector that we call our secondary sector. Now that the primary sector has extracted those natural resources, and now the natural resources are taken to the secondary sector, whereby the raw materials are now going to be changed. They are now going to be transformed to finished or unfinished goods and or products. In this sector, the raw materials from the primary sector are converted into new products. So this sector deals mainly with the changing, with the transformation of the raw materials which are obtained from the primary sector in order to make them to be finished products that can be used by consumers. Now let's look at the examples of industries that are found in the secondary sector. We have our manufacturing. You will find the construction. You will find the factories, electricity generation. Before we move on to the tertiary sector, these are some of the examples, not to say the list is just as limited as these 4 examples that are included here. There are many industries, but one thing that you need to know is that these industries, they deal with transforming the natural resources to become useful products that can be used by consumers. Let's move on to the tertiary sector. The meaning of the tertiary sector, it refers to industries that offer services to other businesses and consumers. So the main purpose of the tertiary sector is to render services to other businesses and to consumers themselves. They don't deal with changing or transforming raw materials, like we've said before, that it's the duty of the secondary sector to do that. So this one deals with making sure that they provide the service to other businesses. You will see as we continue how do they provide the service. This sector is also known as services industry, which exists to facilitate the transportation, distribution, and sale of goods produced in the secondary sector. So after the secondary sector have changed or have transformed the products, now here comes in the tertiary sector, whereby they take those finished products or finished goods and transport them and distribute them to different destinations so that they can be easily reached by consumers. So here the tertiary sector would offer transportation in order for those goods to move to different places whereby consumers, me and you, can be able to access, can be able to buy those goods. Then here are the examples of industries that are found under the tertiary sector. We have financing. It deals with the savers. You don't have a tangible asset that you come out with after getting that particular savers. Hence, we are saying financing, it falls under the tertiary sector because they deal with a savers rather than a product itself. Then we have hospitality, we have retailers, we have wholesalers, we have storage, and also we have tourism, and lastly we have our transportation. Remember, they deal with services rather than products themselves. A service of transport, taking goods from the secondary sector, distributing it to different destinations, different retail stores, whereby a consumer can be able to reach those particular products. The primary, secondary, and tertiary sectors all work together to create an economic chain of production, because we know that they move from one sector to another sector and from secondary sector to the tertiary sector. In that way, these three sectors, they contribute to the gross domestic products of the country. The primary sector extracts the raw materials, the secondary sector transforms the raw materials into products, and the tertiary sector sells the products and supports the activities of the other primary and secondary sectors. Like we've said, that it starts with the primary sector, whereby they extract the raw materials from nature, and thereafter, after extraction of those raw materials, in order for those raw materials to be changed, they have to be moved to another sector, which is the secondary sector, whereby they transform those particular raw materials, change them to become useful products that are going to be used by the consumers. There comes in a tertiary sector, whereby they offer their services, their transportation services, whereby they take the products to the reach of the customers. We would make just an example of a gold mine, whereby they dig gold, which is a raw gold. It's the primary sector that deals with digging of that raw gold, and then moving on, taking that raw gold to the secondary sector, whereby they're going to change that particular gold into a jewelry that you usually see in stores. And after changing that particular gold into jewelry, there comes in a tertiary sector, whereby they transport those jewelry into different jewelry shops, whereby we are able to now buy our watches, buy our rings, buy our necklaces. So it all started where? From the digging of the gold and changing of the gold by the secondary sector, and transportation of jewelry to different stores for us to be able to reach those particular products as consumers. New word, it's interrelated. It means to relate or connect to one another. So our business sectors are interrelated. They are dependent on one another. Business sectors are therefore interrelated and connected with each other. The primary sector depends on the secondary sector for manufactured goods such as machinery and equipment. So obviously the machines, the tractor that you would use on your primary sector, the machines, the equipment that you're going to use on the primary sector on that mine whereby you dig gold, those machines, they are being produced in the secondary sector. So obviously the primary sector depends on the secondary sector for those particular equipments in order for them to perform their activities, which is extracting and cultivating of the natural resources. The primary sector and secondary sector also depends on the tertiary sector to provide services such as insurance and transport. So obviously it would go back to saying even the primary sector and the secondary sector, they depend on the tertiary sector for services that are being rendered by the tertiary sector. Your transportation, your financing industries, they are found there. Obviously the money that they get in the secondary sector, in the primary sector, they need to bank that money. Where do we find banks? We find banks in the tertiary sector. So all these sectors, they are dependent on one another. With that being said, learners, let us just go for a quick breather and we will be back. See you shortly.